Howdy folks, it's Will here from Flow Mountain Bike, and this is the brand new 2022 Trek Top Fuel. Now, the Trek Top Fuel gets an all-new frame this year, along with updates to the suspension design and the geometry. It still sits in between the Supercaliber, which is the 60mm travel XC race bike, and the Fuel EX, which is the 130mm travel trail bike. The Top Fuel gets 120mm travel front and rear. That's a 5mm increase on the back compared to the old bike, which is partly achieved by a longer stroke shock. Trek has also flipped the trunnion shock upside down, and the Rockerlink now drives the shock via two seal cartridge bearings for improved sensitivity. You'll no longer find a remote lockout on the Top Fuel, and along with slacker geometry and those chunky tyres, that sees it moving away from its XC racing heritage and more towards being a lightweight trail bike. Now, while the frame itself looks quite similar to the old bike, there have been a whole suite of updates to this frame, which add up to quite a big overall difference. The chassis is notably beefier. The seat tube swells to the new school 34.9mm diameter, and it's also shorter too. And that means it can swallow a nice long stroke dropper post, but it also increases frame stiffness too. The down tube is also larger, and it now features the integrated storage design that we've seen on the latest Fuel EX and Slash models. There's a latch underneath the bottle cage, and that reveals a storage compartment inside and a neat tool roll that's included with the bike. The knockblock headset has been updated with the steering radius increased from 58 to 72 degrees. That provides greater freedom of movement on the trail, but it still prevents the handlebar controls from smashing into the top tube. Also nice to see is the Top Fuel frame moves to a threaded bottom bracket shell, and we've also got integrated guide tubes for the internal cable routing. There have also been several key updates to the Trek Top Fuel geometry. The head angle is slackened out by 1.5 degrees. That's now 66 degrees. The reach measurement has also increased by 10mm, so on the size large we've got here, that's now 480mm. The seat tube angle is also steepened by 1 degree to 76 degrees. Meanwhile, the rear center length does stay the same at 435mm, and so does the bottom bracket drop at 36mm. The Top Fuel frame still features the minnow link, but it's now located at the bottom shock eyelet. The bikes will come from the factory set in the low position, but flipping that into high will lift the bottom bracket by 7mm and steepen the angles by 0.4 degrees. For further tweaking, the Top Fuel frame is rated for a 130mm travel fork. Plug one of those in and the head angle will slacken out to 65.6 degrees in the low position. If you want to push the needle even further, there's clearance for 2.5-inch tyres in this bike. In addition to the Top Fuel 9.9 that will be available via the Project One custom bike builder, there will be 4 Top Fuel models coming into Australia for 2022. 2 of those will feature alloy frames and 2 will feature carbon frames. Pricing will start at 3,499 Australian dollars for the Top Fuel 5. Then we've got the Top Fuel 8 for $5,299. Then the Top Fuel 9.7 for $6,299. And the Top Fuel 9.8 XT that we have here, which has a retail price of 8,299 Australian dollars. For that price, you're getting the OCLV carbon fibre frame. We've also got a RockShox SID Select Plus fork and a Deluxe Ultimate RCT shock. There's a Shimano XT group set with a 30-tooth chainring, short 170mm crank arms and 4-piston brake calipers. There's a Bontrager Line Elite carbon wheel set, and that's wrapped with 2.4-inch wide XR4 team issue tyres. Confirmed weight for our Top Fuel 9.8 XT test bike is 12.88 kilos. And as always, that's weighed with the tyre set up tubeless and without pedals. We put the new Trek Top Fuel into the hands of our tester Ben, who actually owns the current Top Fuel and has also spent a load of time on the Fuel EX. At 181 centimeters tall, Ben's been riding a large size across all 3 bikes. Now, the reach is pretty darn big on this bike, but that's balanced nicely by a short 50mm stem and that 76-degree seat tube angle. The 760mm wide riser bars are a great match for this bike, and while it might be overkill for some, the 170mm stroke dropper post will certainly get the tick of approval from MTB fashionistas. On the trail, the Trek Top Fuel is easy to get used to, with no quirks to the fit, the handling or the suspension design. Compared to the outgoing Top Fuel, the steeper seat angle is noticeable. It puts you in a more efficient climbing position with less need for bum shuffling on really steep, long stem chewing climbs. The pedaling performance is also superb. Despite the burlier exterior, Trek is still prioritising pedal efficiency on the Top Fuel with a main pivot that sits high and quite far forward of the bottom bracket. Anti-squat is claimed to hover around the 100% mark, and indeed the rear suspension clenches tightly under chain torque, propelling the whole bike forward with minimal energy loss. The suspension isn't drastically plusher than its predecessor, but it is more supportive. And that's particularly when absorbing square edge hits at speed, and also when the whole bike returns to earth after boosting a lip on the trail. Now, many bikes in this travel bracket use a flex stay suspension design like the Canyon Lux Trail and the specialized Stump Jumper because it's a simpler platform and it also helps to reduce weight. In comparison, the Top Fuel sticks with a genuine 4-bar platform that's based around the ABP suspension design. ABP is claimed to isolate brake forces from the suspension, and indeed the back end is impressively active whether you're on the brakes or not, and that helps to increase both traction and control. With all the key pivot points rolling on ball bearings, the rear suspension is nicely active, and it's got a really consistent feel to both compression and rebound all the way through the travel. Along with those chunky XR4 tyres, this bike delivers excellent traction on loose climbs, sketchy corners, and on rough descents. Speaking of, it's a vastly more stable bike on the descents compared to the outgoing Top Fuel. The wheelbase, which is nearly 40mm longer, ekes out greater high-speed stability, and the slack head angle inspires more confidence when you're pointed downhill. It's a really solid little trail bike, and in fact, the geometry kind of makes the current Fuel EX look a little outdated. It does have a little less travel, but if you do put that 130mm fork on the front, the head angle actually ends up slacker than the Fuel EX. That means there's quite a lot of overlap between these two bikes now, and it does make us wonder what's in store for the next generation Fuel EX. You've probably gathered that the new Top Fuel is more of a muscly trail ripper than a spindly XC featherweight. The lack of a remote lockout results in a much cleaner cockpit, and we like that it signals the Top Fuel's commitment to its trail riding intentions. However, it may disappoint some riders who prefer having an instantaneous sprint button at their fingertips. The updates to this bike means there's now an even bigger gap to the Supercaliber, with the Top Fuel actually having double the rear travel. Those riders who are still interested in some part-time XC racing but have been put off by the Supercaliber's sharp geometry and the proprietary iso-strut suspension design may be turned off by the Top Fuel's new attitude. Of course, you could easily inject speed with some lighter weight tyres like Bontrager's fast-rolling XR2s, and there's also plenty of weight to be saved in the wheel set. The Bontrager Line Elite wheel set weighs in at 2,071 grams, which is really heavy, and that's actually the same wheel set that you'll find spec'd on the Slash Enduro bike. The Top Fuel 9.8 XT is otherwise a really appealing package out of the box, and that's especially the case when you consider it's $1,600 cheaper than the outgoing model, despite having a pretty similar build kit. Honestly, how a mountain bike has gotten cheaper in the midst of a global pandemic, we have no freaking idea. If we're being picky, the dropper post is a bit sluggish, the 35mm carbon bars are quite harsh, and the RockShox suspension isn't quite as sensitive as the Fox equivalent. Otherwise, there is very little to sneeze at here, it's all good stuff. And that, my friends, brings us to the verdict of the 2022 Trek Top Fuel. Tying together a whole series of updates to the frame and suspension design, there's no doubt the new Top Fuel is more capable than its predecessor. It's still very efficient, but having adopted a more progressive approach to the geometry, it delivers a noticeable increase in stability. Along with the active ABP suspension design and those chunky tyres, there's an exceptional amount of grip and support here, which isn't always a given for a 120mm travel bike. Those changes may have put off the weight weenies and the lockout lovers, but there's no denying that the Top Fuel has broadened its appeal to an even wider range of riders, and we reckon it's a load more fun as a result. Now, there is a load more detail about the new Trek Top Fuel in the full review over at flowmountainbike.com. Make sure you click the link in the video description below to check out the full review. If you've got any questions for us about the new Trek Top Fuel, make sure you wang those into the comments below. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Tooroo!